All right, the subject of this briefing is an analysis and assessment of a program known as the gateway process. Let's get started. Now, let's be crystal clear about what we're looking at here. This isn't theory, it's not fiction. Everything we're about to go over comes directly from a U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command document, declassified back in 2003. This was an official assessment requested by a commanding officer. The analyst who got handed this strange assignment was Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonald. And in his opening memo to his commander, he pretty much says it all. This wasn't your standard intelligence report. He had to dive into quantum mechanics, theoretical physics, biomedical engineering, all the light reading, just to get a grip on what he was even looking at. And that's really the core question, isn't it? What in the world is the gateway process? And why did a seasoned military intelligence officer find it so incredibly hard to wrap his head around? Well, let's break it down. To get to the bottom of this, McDonald knew he had to start with a baseline. You see, before you can possibly understand what makes gateway so unique, you have to understand the other, more conventional ways we have of altering human consciousness. So think of your brain as having two sides, right? The logical, analytical left brain, and the intuitive, creative right brain. Hypnosis works by essentially putting that logical left brain to sleep. It just bypasses the gatekeeper to talk directly to the right brain. Meditation and biofeedback, on the other hand, do the opposite. They use the left brain's intense focus to consciously persuade the right brain to do what it wants. One sneaks past the guard, the other convinces the guard to open the door. And that brings us to the heart of the gateway process, a technology called hemisync. Now, this isn't about one side of the brain dominating the other. This is about getting them to work together in perfect lockstep harmony. We're talking about a state of total brain coherence, something that is incredibly rare in our normal day-to-day life. So how does it work? Well, the mechanism is actually pretty clever. It uses a natural quirk of our brains called the frequency following response. Basically, our brainwaves have this tendency to match the frequency of outside sounds. So with hemisync, you played two slightly different tones, one in each ear. The brain doesn't really hear either tone. Instead, it creates a third, phantom beat frequency that's the difference between the two. This clever trick allows the brain to tune itself to frequencies it can't even physically hear, forcing both hemispheres to lock on and synchronize. The report uses a really brilliant metaphor to explain what this feels like. A normal, everyday mind is like a light bulb. Its energy is chaotic, shining in every direction at once. But a mind in a state of hemisync, that's like a laser. All that same energy is now focused into a single, coherent beam of incredible power. Okay, so we've got a way to turn the human mind into a laser. That's powerful, for sure. But why? Why was the U.S. Army so interested in this? What's the application here? And this is the exact moment where the report goes from brain science into something else entirely. To understand the true purpose of Gateway, Lieutenant Colonel McDonald realized he had to go beyond biology and into theoretical physics. He had to challenge the very fabric of reality as we know it. Right. This is where our analysis takes a pretty significant turn. The report argues that to understand how you can project consciousness, you first have to understand the space you're trying to project it into. I want you to just listen to this. This is a direct quote from the assessment. Let it sink in. The foundational premise of this military intelligence report is that the solid world around us is an illusion. You, me, this screen, it's all just a dance of interacting energy fields. The framework McDonald uses to explain this is something called the holographic principle. The core idea is that the entire universe, everything in it, is one single, unimaginably complex hologram. And this is the key part, our own consciousness is also a hologram, one that's constantly decoding information from that universal energy field. And here's the property of a hologram that makes this whole thing work. If you take a holographic plate and shatter it into a million pieces, each tiny little fragment still contains the entire image. It might be fuzzy, lower resolution, but the whole picture is still there. The report argues our consciousness is like one of those fragments. As a small piece of the universal hologram, we still have access to the information of the whole thing. So let's put the pieces together. If the universe is a hologram that we can access and hemisync can turn our mind into a laser-like tool, well, the objective of the gateway technique starts to become pretty clear. It's not just about looking at the hologram, it's about learning how to navigate it. To do that, the report has to introduce one last big concept, the absolute. This is the report's term for a boundless, infinite field of pure consciousness. Think of it as the source code for reality itself. Everything, all energy, all matter, time and space, it all comes from the absolute. So how do you actually get there? Well, the report claims it's through something called the click-out phenomenon. Picture a wave like a brainwave. At the very top and very bottom of each oscillation, for a split second, the energy stops. It's at rest. The theory in the report is that in that tiny moment, the energy literally clicks out of our dimension and touches the absolute. The whole purpose of hemisync, then, is to ramp up your brainwave frequency so fast that these clickouts happen one after another, forming a kind of continuous bridge for your consciousness to cross. And there you have it. That's the bottom line. The entire point of the gateway process is to train a person's consciousness to detach from their physical body and navigate the universal hologram, a place where the past, the present, and the future all exist at the same time. So that brings us to the final assessment. Lieutenant Colonel McDonnell had to take all these wild concepts, hemisync, the holographic universe, the click-out phenomenon, and somehow package them into a coherent model for his commanding officer. The model he came up with is called the cosmic egg. Picture our universe getting shot out of the absolute, traveling around the shell of this giant cosmic egg, and that journey is what we experience as time. Then, at the very end, it gets sucked back into the absolute. But here's the kicker. The universal hologram contains that entire journey, beginning, middle, and end, all at once. And if that model is correct, it leads to some very specific applications. The training uses different focus levels. At focus 12, you might get enhanced problem solving or even influence reality. By focus 15, you could theoretically travel into the past. And at focus 21, you could perceive probable future events. But, and this is important, the analyst was careful to point out major practical hurdles. The biggest one is information distortion. When your consciousness is out of body, it's really hard to tell the difference between solid reality, an energy echo from the past, or just a stray thought. That makes getting accurate information incredibly difficult. But even with those challenges, we arrive at the final, absolutely stunning conclusion of this official assessment. After all the analysis, all the physics, the bottom line that was delivered to the commander was this: the gateway process is plausible. McDonnell actually ends his report with this quote from an ancient Hindu text. It seems this idea of a holographic reality where every single part reflects the whole isn't new at all. The real question this document leaves us with is, did the U.S. Army actually figure out how to explore it?